Even before the city of Royal Oak was incorporated in 1921, Northwood School had been a vision. The story begins in 1893 when F.W. Clausen and his wife Mary bought the land for what is now the Northwood subdivision. Nearly a generation later, on February 18, 1922, F.W. Clausen Land Company, through the generosity of H. Lloyd Clausen, offered the site to the school district of the new city of Royal Oak. 6 months later, the school board designated the gift of property to serve as a site for Northwood School, gratefully accepting the deed on September 11, 1922. Things were happening very quickly. Later that September, a $20,000 bond issue to erect a modern brick school building came before voters. After all ballots were counted, Chairman George A. Dondero declared that it was the most unusual election he had ever seen during the time he had served on the school board. The final tally, 125 votes in favor, 0 against. By January of 1923, a 2-unit facility had been constructed. Within 6 months, the new Northwood School was already determined to be too small to accommodate the pupils that were to come from that section of Royal Oak. A 2-room addition was already necessary. An extra $20,000 was to be spent to expand the number of rooms to 4. Bids for the construction were received in September, with the work to be done quickly. It had to be finished by November 1st, less than 2 months away. But the growth of the Northwood school community didn't stop, and soon the first expansion was already inadequate. Northwood was filled to capacity. On October 3, 1924, a special school election was held to request a $200,000 bond to complete the Northwood expansion. Plans for the building were drawn by architect Frederick D. Madison, calling for 18 classrooms, 1 gymnasium, a playroom, a large recitation room, principal's office, and other amenities to suit a swelling population of 600 students. The new school was completed in 1925. More than 80 years later, Northwood School has a legacy of excellence in education and is a shining example of how a community can benefit by making the development of its children its top priority. Soon, a new chapter in the Northwood School story begins.
One of the things I remember about Northwood School, I can't remember the early years. Now, I started there in 1924, and I was in the 1st grade, and I think I was the 2nd year that the school had been opened. But Grace Christman was the first principal there, and she was a very strict disciplinarian. And in those days, if a boy did something bad, he got paddled. And so I remember that she would paddle the kids. One thing I remember about the 6th grade, the teachers brought their own lunch, and then they had a hot plate that they cooked up soup or spaghetti or something on. And then they would choose one of the 6th grade girls to do the dishes.
Oh, really?
And so it was always a great privilege if it was my week to do the dishes for the teachers. And Francis and I were trying to remember the names of all of the teachers when we were there.
I have almost all of them.
Oh,
only
good.
Whoever I had for 1st grade, I don't know. But you know, Jerry and my sister started the very first year that the school was built, because my sister was going to kindergarten at Longfellow School. Mm-hmm. And you know, she was so lonesome down there, she didn't like it. And as soon as that school was built, because we lived not across the street, but down a little bit. And so she was happy to be closer to home.
Then who are the teachers?
Well, there was Miss Losher was the kindergarten teacher. Now, I don't know who was the 1st grade, but Miss Harry was the 2nd grade. And Miss, I had Miss Scott for the 3rd grade. And then Miss Hall, remember Miss Hall?
Mm-hmm.
And Miss Delaforce.
Delaforce.
And Miss Bonebright.
Yep.
And then Miss Ross was music. And, and remember Miss Bro? Mrs. Bro.
Oh, yeah.
Had, I think they called it religion, didn't they?
Well, it was Bible stories.
Bible stories.
Yeah. A song when we left 6th grade. And all I can remember is, "Dear Northwood School, dear Northwood School, we are leaving you for good. We've worked and played all the days you've made, learning but happy," something like that. And Mina Ross was our music teacher, and she would come into the room singing, and we learned all the old folk songs. What other games did the boys play, Jerry?
We were out in a soccer field all the time.
Yes.
In the back.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they liked it or not, but they tried to avoid getting too many people back there, because we were always just a step away from being in the classroom on time.
Yeah.
Because the game wasn't over yet.
Yeah.
How about marbles?
Marbles wasn't that popular, but I was one of the marble boys, and there were a few others, but there wasn't that many. There were marbles, yes.
Story of the secret garden that they would read to us, and then they'd stop it at a certain point. And we just could hardly wait to come back the next day to hear the rest of that story. And so she, when she came, I said to her, "Why and how is it that you came about doing it?" And she says, "Well, we teachers got together and we talked about it, and we decided that if we put it together and they ended it at a certain spot, that would be perfect," she said. And it was. Because I later on met a fellow by the name of Bob Taylor, who went to Northwood School, and he was telling me he went there. And I said, "Did you ever hear The Secret Garden?" He says, "Oh, did I ever?" He said, "I loved it." And he said, "Oh, it was fabulous." He says, "Miss Lewis would read it to us," and he says, "That really was a turning point in my life." Northwood was a good school, was always a good school, good teachers. I went on, because of the art teacher there, she sent me on to the teacher in Miss Meads. Her name was Harriet Meads, and she was with either the junior high in Royal Oak or the high school. And I took lessons from her on art and did that for quite a few years, 2 or 3 years. So that I had a lot of art experience in back of me when I went on to college. So, but that was because of Northwood.
I'm Jo Woods. This is my daughter, Courtney Follian, my granddaughter, Veronica Follian. All 3 of us went to school at Northwood Elementary. I went to school here a really long time ago. Then I was Joanna Frazee. And all the 32 kids on my block on Webster Road were here during a 10-year period in the 1950s. When I was here, Miss Lewis was the principal. I remember Mr. Murdoch teaching us social studies every afternoon. We were divided into classrooms, and we had language arts in the morning, and in the afternoon we went to library and music and art and social studies on a rotation basis. The school was exactly the same on the outside, but on the inside it was different, because when Courtney was here, he totally redid the inside of Northwood. Some of my favorite things about Northwood is I remember churning butter in an old-fashioned 1800s butter churn in front of the fireplace that was in Mrs. Lane's kindergarten, and I honestly don't know what room that is right now. I'm thrilled that both my granddaughter and my daughter went to school here. I think Royal Oak has really good schools, and I have very fond memories of Northwood.
My name's Mary Beth Grimm McElroy, and I attended Northwood for 5th and 6th grade, and I also teach here at Northwood now in 1st grade, and it's been fun coming back. My memories of Northwood where the office is now. I remember coming back in the summertime and having fluoride treatments in big dental chairs, and we'd all line up and be outside. I remember a candy store over by where Dr. Ehrman's office is, and we would all go there after school and get our penny candy and then walk home. I remember Dr. Murdoch. He was my first teacher. He taught debate. He was so kind to me, being new to the building and an older, individual. I remember the tower with Mrs. Oldula and going upstairs and what fun it was, that wonderful tower. And I remember that when we would get picked up from school, you could drive the parking lot all across the back and you would come out on 12 Mile, where the playground, the only one left that we have. And that's why people, when they ask about why is this entrance back here, why is it so nice? Well, we used to have that half of an arc driveway, and we would get dropped off and go into school there. And those are my memories. I remember the students did the newspaper, and where the copy room is for the teachers now, we would stop after lunch every day, and 2 students would man that area, and you could drop off your articles. We had recipes we did, we had stories we wrote, we had reporters, and we didn't have a PTA newsletter, we had a student newsletter. Wonderful memories. I'll always be able to keep them, even though the building's coming down, but I am going to the new building, and we can all start new memories there.
My name is Jim Ellison. I'm the mayor of Royal Oak. I was a student at Northwood Elementary School from 1957 until 1964. Trying to trap into memories of what I had. When I had kindergarten, I had Mrs. Springman for kindergarten, and the kindergarten room at that time was back in the northeast corner of the building, back in the dark corner, as we called it. And, I don't remember, that's a long time ago, 1957. In first grade, I had Miss Van Dusen, first grade. Second grade, I had Mrs. Bowditch. Third grade was interesting because at the time when I was going to the school was so crowded they couldn't fit us all in. And so my third grade class, I had Mrs. Saggy. We had our full year of class up at the First Congregational Church up at Webster and Crooks. And so, since the bulk of us were in that class, lived in that neighborhood, so we just walked to the church. So we had a full year Northwood students away from the building. So that was kind of memorable there. Fourth grade came back. I actually had 2 teachers. I had Mrs. Peterson and Mrs. Feigner. Mrs. Feigner's husband, Mr. Feigner, used to be principal at Don Darrow. Fifth grade, Mr. Murdoch. Mr. Murdoch was a legend at Northwood. He was the teacher everybody had. He was strict. He was just the nicest guy. Everybody loved him. But he got work out of you. Sixth grade was probably the most memorable year for me because so many things happened. One of the early things in sixth grade, I had Mrs. White. We had 2 sixth grade teachers that year, Mrs. Snow, Mrs. White. It was very interesting, Mrs. Snow White. But in my sixth grade year was 1963, and that was the year that President Kennedy was assassinated. And so I remember we were in one of the classrooms upstairs here that they came in and made an announcement, and it's one of those things that you always remember where you were and the dead silence in the room. But sixth grade was also the first time that I won an election, because I was elected to student council by my classmates. And so that started me on my path to better government, I guess. So that was it going through, through the years. Why I was here, the hill was built. The hill started off as a bunch of piles of dirt that came off the back of dump trucks. So instead of having one hill, we had probably about 30 hills out there until they came in with the bulldozers and pushed it all up and made it into the hill. Now at the time when they finished it, they had a little walkway and steps up one side and handrails, and they had trees on it. It was all it was really kind of nice. But over the years, we all know what the hill ended up at, and now the hill's gone. Also during that time, we had a program going of doing landscaping throughout the schoolyard. A lot of the trees that are out there now, unfortunately, most of them are probably gone with the new school, but we planted a lot of trees out there. And I remember in particular, there was a section where we planted a bunch of hedges in the shape of a big N. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I think 1 or 2 of those hedges were still there. They were back just off the Crooks roadside, but I remember watching the N slowly disappear over the years as I visited back in the school. But But yeah, I got a lot of memories. And Northwood was a good time. It was a great school. My parents still lived in the area, so it wasn't unusual for me to go over and visit my parents and bring my kids over and play on the playground. I remember when they put in the wood structure with all the tires and everything. We used to love playing over there until they had to take that one out. But yeah, Northwood's been a part of my life for a very long time, and I'm going to miss this old building. But we're getting a brand new one, and it's going to be great.
I'm Anita Heap, and I started, I was a teacher at Northwood from 1970. I came into the building in 1970, met Mr. Murdoch for the first time. Miss Frances Lewis was the principal when I entered the building, and I was here for 37 years, retiring last June 2007. Many great memories inside this building, lots of wonderful things always happening. But one of my memories is this gentleman sitting here on my right, Bob Murdoch.
How do you do?
Good to meet you.
Yeah, glad to see you.
And Mr. Murdoch is a legend in his own right at Northwood because he handled a lot of things in addition to teaching. One of them we were talking about the safety squad, the safety patrol and service squad.
Yeah.
And he was the sponsor. He also handled the audio-visual side of it.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to explain what that was when you had the kids on.
Looking after cameras and projectors and moving them where they should be and so forth.
And what about the hill and how that was developed? You were talking about where the dirt came from?
Yeah, it came from different places.
Because the hill wasn't always here. The hill was man-made. You made it.
And so was the
In a
stadium.
sense. You were saying that as they built a few of the homes across the street?
Yeah, because a few of the homes they were building across the street. So I went over and talked to the guys, and they were going to get rid of dirt someplace. And I said, well, the easiest place to do it is put it right over here, where it'll be out of the way, and we can add to it. And we did add to it. And we added to it, and we added to it. And we finally got a hill out of it. And then we built up the side so you had a railing that you could do. In the winter, the school itself owned certain plays and so forth that they could go down on. And other kids could bring their slippery type of things that they could keep and then go out after school or during school. And they had to get permission. They just couldn't go out. But there usually would be a teacher or somebody that would watch them too, and they could go down the hill with the thing and then come back up along the safe way and go down again.
And I was saying to Bob, I said, well, the thing is the teachers had a choice. We could be there at the top of the hill, and if it was icy, I was afraid that I was going to slip, go right down right down the hill without a device. Or if I was at the bottom of the hill, I had to be real careful because somebody might take aim. So
did they ever get you?
I know, they never got me. Sometimes I went down actually a few times myself, though, purposely.
Oh.
Thank you. So I enjoyed the hill as well. Okay, and then what did we do at the hill other times of the year? Like special events?
We would have programs there where people should get benefits from what they have accomplished in school. They did great things in school and they would get recommended for it. And the principal would be out there sometimes too, thanking them and what they did and so forth. And then we would have other group singers and musicians out there. And they were good. They were school kids. And they played and they were good. And I really enjoyed music. I really liked the music.
Yep, we showcased their talents. We had dancers.
Yep.
And we had singers, as you said, and then we would bring out, and we were talking about we had an electric keyboard.
Yeah,
way
we
back
brought
then.
that out from school and had a cord from the room, probably this room, out to so it would work. And that was really good.
Yeah.
No, it was great. Good students, good people, good teachers.
In this room, because I do remember many a day on the Northwood sledding hill, which is no more, but coming in with our clothes absolutely soaking wet, and our teacher at the time, who I believe was Mrs. Poisson,
Yep.
allowing us to all line up and sit on the heater over on that side of the
Dry
room to
your
dry
pants.
off. And, you know, there was always a joker or two that would invariably melt some crayons down in there. And, you know, someone was always getting in trouble over on that side of the room as we dried out.
Yes, and that also was the year that I was in 5th grade, and I think you were in 3rd grade. And we were also in class with kids that were in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Yes.
And it was supposed to be a group, peer group learning situation, and I just didn't like you in my class.
See, I loved it because when you have the older sibling, you want to do everything that they do. And I was in the younger sector of the class, so I thought it was very cool to have all these older kids in the room with me. And, you know, of course, I was one of them. You know, I wasn't one of the younger kids with all these other older kids in the room.
Yeah, I think after that year, I pretty much blazed a trail, and I was in a straight
She got
6.
out. You got
and I
out.
was out.
I stayed in one more year. I did it 2 years in a row.
It's also interesting because I remember before the school was remodeled, I remember when the entrance was on 12 Mile. I remember what the hallways looked like, and then when I was in 3rd grade when they reconfigured the building and we left for a year, and you know, to come back and that was new now, and now to see what I thought was new as the old, it's going to be really exciting for me to go into the new building and again see another change and progression with Northwood. I do remember our first music teacher was Mr. Henkel.
I do too. He'd
And
sit on the floor cross-legged and play his guitar.
His guitar, yep. And we learned every John Denver song that
Yes,
I think
we
was
did.
ever recorded.
Probably some Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Yep,
Yes.
yep, it was good. And they were put up on the overhead, typewritten on, you know, that
The
plastic.
mimeograph.
Yes, yes, and that's how we learned our songs. So, yeah, it is a really unique experience to bring your kids to the same kindergarten door that you walked in, and also to see parents that you went to school bringing their kids here. It gives me a great sense of pride that many people stay here and bring their children back where they went to school. And I think it will continue. This community in this area, you know, has families that love Royal Oak. Even if they move away for a while, they come back.
At Northwood was the willow tree, which is now gone because of the new building. And when I was here, we had 2 playgrounds, and 1st and 2nd were on the small playground, and then 3rd through 6th were on the big playground. That was a really big deal when you were finally old enough to get to the big playground, because it, of course, had all the better playground equipment. The building looked exactly the same. Of course, a lot of the rooms were different, but the ramp and going all the way upstairs to gym, the library, I always remembered that we loved to be kept inside to play instead of having to go outside in the cold, and a lot of times we'd end up in the library. We'd get to play in the library.
Hi, I'm Tom Moline, Superintendent, Royal Oak School District, and I've been superintendent now going on my 3rd year. My first memories of the Northwood Elementary School were somewhat like the entering kindergartner coming into that old facility. And I know it's operating 86 years this year, which is a lifetime for most of us. But I was introduced to the building by interim superintendent Tom Shorkey. And halfway through walking through the building, he took a cell phone call and left me alone. So I started to wander the building and immediately got lost. And then couldn't find my way back. And I'm told that new children have that experience all the time with all of the additions that were put onto Northwood. So I eventually found an exit door on the east parking lot. I didn't know where I was, and so I had to call Mr. Shorkey on the other side of the building to find out how to get back into the building. So my feeling at that point was maybe it's time to think about a new Northwood. I've met but a handful of the people that have attended Northwood back when it was a new school. But I do know that that building, like several others in the Royal Oak community, were more than just schools. They were community centers. They were the hub of activity for a lot of social functions that brought the neighborhood blocks together. And so I know the building of New Northwood and the eventual end of Old Northwood is bittersweet for some people, in that there's a lot of history and and a lot of affection for a facility that drew people together. So in that regard, I'm sorry to see it go. But with everything, there's a beginning and an end, and we do celebrate the history of the old Northwood and the new building, and we will try and run those traditions in terms of serving those community areas and providing a setting for social functions for many years to come.
I consider myself very, very fortunate to be a part of the Northwood staff and to be a part of this transition that Northwood is going through at this time. Needless to say, it's the first time in my career that I've ever been a part of a school that's actually going to be closing and ending a part of their history and starting off with a brand new phase in its life. And it is truly exciting. I have an opportunity to work with a teaching staff and a support staff that is truly excellent and has the best interests of children at heart. And they're vested in seeing that the transition goes well, and they also have a history here with the school. Most of my staff is a senior staff, and they've been at Northwood for quite a while. So they have memories of Northwood that certainly won't fade as time goes on. So they're very much a part of this whole transition process that we're going through right now. I'm relatively new at Northwood. To date, I've been here for approximately a year and a half. So I've learned a great deal from my parents and also from the teachers about the history of Northwood and how it actually came to be here at this site and the changes structurally and otherwise it has gone through in the past years. So this building and all the memories here mean a great deal to us as a teaching staff at Northwood.
Trouble smells like lemon drops way above the chimney tops.